Hi, I'm Sean Duggan, and this is TheFIX, a podcast about Photoshop, Lightroom, post-processing, and the cool and creative things we get to do with our images after the shoot. On this week's show, we're going to space out a little bit with my guest, digital imaging author and educator Stephen Burns, who's going to put on his planetary brewmeister apron and show us how to use the 3D features in Adobe Photoshop to create a ringed planet and then integrate it into a photographic composite. So make sure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables and seat backs are in the complete upright position, because we'll be blasting off soon. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in and joining me here on TheFIX. Happy to have Stephen Burns back with us. Stephen, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sean. This is great to be back again. Looking forward to kind of delving more into more 3D fun.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking of that, you were a guest on the show 5 months ago. It was late September, and you kind of gave a great introductory overview of some of the 3D capabilities in Photoshop, and certainly got my interest piqued in exploring that further, although I must say I haven't really had much time to explore it further in that 5 months.
Well, it's like we had talked about before, 3D is something you don't want to just play with. It's a little more of a learning curve, but once you get into it, it's addictive. I think it's very addictive. And, and some of the things I'm going to share with you guys today are going to be a very basic application of 3D for you photographers out there. We can go much more in depth, but this will be something to kind of pique your interest.
Yeah. Well, so let me just sort of frame what we're going to be doing today for the viewers and listeners. So as a photographer and a compositing artist, I am most interested in using Photoshop's 3D capabilities to create things that I can then add to my photo composite. So I'm not interested in necessarily creating an entire 3D world from scratch. I'm interested in taking some of my existing landscape or urban photos or whatever and integrating something into it that I can't photograph. Maybe it's something from my imagination or whatever, something to tell some sort of a story. So that's kind of the challenge that I threw out to Stephen. How can we cover creating something that could be added to a photograph? So that's kind of what we're going to be getting into once we get into the screen sharing part of it.
Sounds good. I promise I'll do no 3D monsters or anything like that.
Well, those are okay, man. I get off on monsters now and then, So, and I should just mention for those of our listeners who are tuning in to the audio version of this via iTunes, this is obviously going to be one of those sort of visually heavy episodes in terms of what we're covering in the show. So we'll do our best to explain what's happening in a way that maybe makes sense if you're just listening to the audio version. But just realize that if it does sound interesting to you, come back to the website at thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX and watch the video version so you can really see what Stephen's going to be showing us.
Oh, they'll definitely come back and watch the video version because they'll find it very interesting in what Adobe has done with Photoshop and what can be done with 3D. Most people will have no idea that you can do any of this stuff. So I'm going to show you some pretty fun little things you can do at home and you're going to be hooked. I promise you that.
Well, that's, I know Photoshop pretty well. Like you, I've been using it for many, many years and, writing in books about it, teaching it, etc. But the 3D area is like one of the areas of Photoshop that I have literally just barely scratched the surface. And so that's an area where I am kind of a total newbie. So that's why I'm looking forward to talking to you here.
Okay.
So speaking about, about doing books and learning Photoshop, when we last met 5 months ago on this show, your book on 3D in Photoshop was sort of in the final phases of production, and it was going to be coming out in a couple of months or something. So that book is now out.
It's now out. Yes.
And what's the title of the book again?
It's called 3D Photoshop for the Creative Professional.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty good. I'm a creative professional. That book is for me.
Yes, yes, it is.
And so, in addition to the book, what I found intriguing is that you also have a companion app that goes along with it. And so, explain how that app works and how it adds to the learning experience.
Well, I was trying to. There's this huge this thirst for knowledge, where the internet's being used quite a bit to get a lot of our basics. Now even have devices like Twitch out there, where now people can go online and paint and draw or do Photoshop or compositing or 3D, and you can just put in the search category like D or Photoshop. Put in Photoshop, it takes you to a whole bunch of streams of people doing Photoshop. Or 3D, it takes you to a whole bunch of streams of people using 3D. You can even refine your search for Photoshop in 3D. So what I'm discovering is that there's all these different ways of learning. There's book learning, your book learning. We have your video learning, which lynda.com is just taking the world by storm on that. So I wanted to take all those different concepts and pull them together in my book. So while you're reading my book, and the app is there as a companion, it's not the book being recreated and then placed back into the app. What it is particular aspects of techniques while I'm creating 3D, which I pulled together in several different video apps. So the app is going to include 3D objects, and it's also going to include videos. So for chapter one is going to be split up into two different sections. Well, all the chapters will be split up in two different sections, one for 3D and one for video. So if you're building, like, say, for example, a planet with rings, which we're actually going to do today, you want to compare your planet to what I've done, then you can go to chapter 5 or 6 or whatever that chapter will be, go to the 3D section and say, okay, 3D, this chapter, okay, there's the planet with rings. Stephen did this. I'm going to look at the 3D object, spin it around, zoom in, zoom out, look at it in three-dimensional direction, and it's all interactive. In addition, if you think you're having problems, particularly, or with the workflow, I should say, you can go to the video section instead of the 3D section. Click on the video sections for that particular chapter. You have a whole bunch of videos that's going to further instruct you on what to look for. So normally when you have books, you have like notes, for like it's an example. Note this, don't forget about these particular adjustments. You have to select a certain particular, or select the move tool in order to actually move your 3D objects around in 3D space. So I create a whole video highlighting that and showing you exactly how I did it while I was creating it. So it's this whole cognitive, visual, and tactile learning experience.
Well, that sounds really interesting, and I imagine that it's particularly useful for communicating some of the concepts about working in 3D, because of course a book is a 2D object, or at least the way I should say a book as we hold it in our 3D object, but the information that is presented on the page in terms of illustrations and stuff is 2D. And of course, when you are working in 3D and in being able to spin an object around, being able to actually see that either via, the 3D section of your app or obviously in videos is, probably very effective for learning those concepts and seeing how it actually applies to working with the objects. Right.
And I guess one of the challenges that I had when I first proposed the book was, how am I going to really effectively, explain 3D so that people are going to get it in a much more intuitive level. So that's where I came up with the idea of, why not try something? We have the technology is there where I can pull together 3D information where people can actually interact with it. So we hired the gaming company, Zephyr Images from New York, And they built the 3D space and the environment for all the videos and the 3D objects to actually live in. So you go to a particular chapter, choose what you want, choose the 3D object you want to view while you're creating, and you can actually compare it to what I have. So, hopefully the app is going to assist everybody out there in the use of the book.
Cool. And that app, is that for both iOS and Android?
Yes, it is. It's both for Android and iOS.
And is it best viewed on a tablet device? Or can you also view it on a phone if you wanted to?
You can use it on any device, a tablet or phone devices. And I've actually played with it on both platforms. It works pretty well. But
cool.
Although I do enjoy my tablet because it's a little bit bigger, so it's a little more of an interactive, fun experience.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, well, let's dive into the exercise that we're going to do today, which you kind of alluded to that a short while ago, creating a planet with rings. And so that's kind of intriguing. I like to create science fiction scenes now and then.
And we can use that planet to kind of bring into any of your photo composites.
So you can render this out eventually with transparency around it, so you can just drop it right in?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, let's dive into the screen share and let's get going then.
Let's go for it. All right. So we have a photographic texture of marble, and I figured it would be kind of fun to actually create a 3D planet based on textures that we have. So I'm going to utilize this particular texture to create the basis of my planet, but I'm going to use it for several different aspects of the planet, not just for its colored surfaces, but also for its textured surface to give it some bump texture, so to speak.
Right. And just to clarify for the listeners, this is a photograph, I'm guessing, right, Stephen? A photograph of marble surface?
This is a photograph. Could we use some type of a noise or clouds effect to create our own texture natively? Yes, we could. But I wanted to address, photographic textures for two reasons, not just because that's our audience, but oftentimes photographic textures will give you the best results. Now imagine, you can take your cell phone camera, you can take pictures of all different types of stone textures. We have stone textures all around, especially in Southern California with the beach and cliffs and so forth. And you can utilize those textures for this same type of a concept.
Or with the marble, just go to the home improvement store and go look at their samples of countertop marbles and just photograph them there in the store.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to duplicate my layer because I would like to do a couple of things here. I want to I'm going to do it twice, Command J twice on my computer and Command or Control J. And I'm going to use one for a bump texture. And I'm going to explain what a bump is or how bump works in the 3D world. So the 3D world is nothing more and nothing less than vector graphic information. When we're dealing with 3D, we're dealing with points on a coordinate, X, Y, and Z. We all know what X and Y is. Z, of course, is that area of that location that allows us to go in and out of space. Currently, we're in 2D space, and we know that because our layers is a standard Photoshop layer. Now, I'm going to alter this to 3D in just a little bit, but now before I do so, I'm going to alter this top layer into black and white information. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use one of my filters up here, go to my image adjustments, and then I think I'm going to go to my black and white adjustment as a filter. And what this does is it allows me to shift my values or my value equivalent of the color. So with my eyedropper, I can click and hold and slide it, and it's going to shift my values up or down depending on the color that I have targeted. Now, why am I doing this? Because whenever you're dealing with something that's going to apply texture in 3D world.
Uh-huh.
Your 3D engine and your 3D program is utilizing those values to create the peaks and the valleys. So in other words, the shady areas here is going to be our valleys. The brighter whites here, the brighter values are going to be our peaks. All right. And this going to utilize that information to create that apparent texture on our planet. All right. So let's I'm going to come right over here. I'm going to kind of play around with this. I'm going to take this down and keep it down pretty low. I'm going to come over to the midtones and see what I can do there. Not bad. I'm going to keep this down low as well, but I like what's going on with some of these brighter areas. I'm going to go target some of the brighter areas, bring those maybe up just a little bit, but keeping some contrast in here, and then target OK.
And so just to clarify for people listening, so that was the black and white adjustment panel.
Yes.
And you're essentially just targeting different colored areas in the image. And of course, the panel is translating those into grayscale values, and you are choosing to make certain areas brighter or darker, depending on how you want your bump map to be.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So now we're going to do next. I'm going to just save this out as a JPEG. So I'm using shortcut Command or Control Shift S, or of course, everybody's probably well familiar with the Save As command. And I'm going to go ahead and put this on my desktop. I have a folder called TWiP. I'm going to utilize that one. And I'm going to save it out as a JPEG. And we're going to call this one Bump. All right. And click Save. Now we know where they are. And so we're going to keep that in mind. So now I'm going to close it out. I don't need it anymore. So let's go to the original color texture. And from here, let's go ahead and create our 3D planet. So when I set things up on my desktop, and you notice that I have my panel set up in a particular way to allow me to work more effectively as a 3D artist working inside of Photoshop. I'm going to hit the F key, which is going to give me the full frame mode. All right, I'm just going to hit it once, and that's going to allow me to focus on this one and put the tabs out of the way. I'm going to zoom in a little closer so it's easier for everybody to see. Now, if you notice my tabs here, I have 4 of them open, and one of them being the 3D panel. My properties is attached to the bottom, because once I alter this into a 3D object, these 2 areas, the 3D tab and the properties, is primarily what you're going to be working in once you have your 3D objects. You won't be going back to layers too much anymore.
I see.
All right, so I'm going to target 3D panel, and we want to alter this into a 3D object, which obviously is going to be our planet. So let's go to 3D mesh from presets. I'm going to click the little radio button. Right over here below it, I have options. So obviously for my planet, we're going to target our sphere. So I'm going to target that and then target create. Sit back and relax and watch it work.
Watch a planet being created.
There you go. And it's fast.
Cool. Yeah, right? It is fast.
So now look at my 3D scene. You have an entire scene. In fact, let's go back to the layers panel and take a look at what you have in terms of a layer. If you look right here, we now have this little cubic symbol, which is telling us that we now have a 3D scene.
So that's the same place on a layer, again, for those people listening, where you would see maybe a little badge on the layer thumbnail that would indicate you're working with a smart object. This is a badge indicating you're working with a 3D object.
That's right. So a smart object may have like a little linking system, where we have the little cubicle symbol. So, all right, looking pretty good. Now, what I want to do is navigate this. In order to navigate, you have to have your move tool selected. Once it's selected, we have our options right up here as to how to navigate. Now, what I like to do is stay in my rotation, have rotations, roll, and I'll kind of talk to about them. And I can navigate around my planet.
Oh, so those are the little tools that you see up in the when you're up in the options bar for the move tool. So I'm guessing now when you have the move tool active on a 3D object, you get those additional tools showing up in the options bar. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's why I've never seen them before.
So now what I'm going to do is go back to the 3D panel. And this is why you're going to always remain in the 3D panel, because what we're doing now is we're actually navigating around the scene. If I target the camera, I'll get the same result. So I'm inside the camera, navigating around my scene as if I'm viewing everything through the camera.
Right. It's like you're orbiting around this planet from different vantage points here now.
Yep. And if we want the actual planet, now it says it's a sphere. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to double click it here and call it planet. And I can rename it. Now this way, it helps me to keep organized. And with that targeted, I can actually just navigate the planet itself instead of the entire 3D scene.
Okay.
And you see right down here, we have this little 3D widget, which is very, very helpful. But I find it just easier just to kind of click and hold around my 3D object. I can move a little bit quicker.
Right.
All right. So we have the basic planet. Now, the goal here is to make rings for this particular planet. Now, I'm looking at the surface, and it's pretty texturous. I mean, I might want to soften it up a little bit. Keep in mind that we can go back and we can edit that texture, because under the planet object, we have right beneath it, its material. If I click on the material option here in my 3D panel, my properties, which is now our options for our 3D objects, gives us some options, gives us some parameters. The diffuse, that's your texture, that's your color. So if you look at this little dog-eared symbol here, it's basically telling you that you actually have a 3D, or not 3D, but an image inside or attached to this 3D object. If I want to go in and edit that in any shape or form, I'm going to click on that little dog-eared symbol and say, hey, let's go in and edit that texture. So what it's doing is it's working like a smart object. So I'm going to edit the texture, open it up. There it is. Now, both of them are actually open. Both files are still there. So I'm going to go to Windows, Arrange, Tile Vertically, so we can see them side by side. I'm going to just, there's my planet over here. To my far left. Over the far right is the actual texture. So now you notice the texture is kind of dark looking, at least it appears that way. So that's because the UV overlay is on. I'm not going to talk about what the UV overlay is yet. It's kind of beyond the purpose. I'm going to turn it off so that we can actually see the texture. Now, once I have the texture showing, now I go back to my standard layers menu and I can edit this like any Photoshop tools that I want. Now, I think what I'll do is I will alter that into a smart object.
I was just going to ask you that question. Excellent.
Right. You follow me. You're following me pretty closely here, keenly here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to apply what? What would you recommend to soften up this texture?
Well, you're actually going right kind of in the area of the questions that I was going to ask. I was going to ask, well, could we apply some sort of a filter to maybe, add like the wave filter or something to this, or,
Yeah, we could.
You can apply whatever filter you think will work best visually for the project. But, you've just answered my question that, yes, we can convert the texture layer to a smart object and apply a filter non-destructively. So
let's try a Gaussian blur to keep it simple. And I'm going to just bring it on over. And there we go. That softens up the surface just a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, all I need to do is hit Command S for save and watch 3D object. There. You see that?
Yeah, I can see it's now softened down on the planet. Yeah.
All right. But then again, we may feel that, that looks too cheesy, right? So we'll go back and I can.
It would only look cheesy if you were using a photograph of cheese for the bump map texture.
So how about if I turn off that Gaussian blur?
Uh-huh.
How about if we go filter blur and let's give it some motion blur?
Oh, okay, cool.
And let's give it, let's take the motion blur. Let's try it from one side, completely horizontal. Give it a little, see what that looks like. And then Command S. And let's see what happens. There we go.
Oh, yeah, right. So now it has a little bit more, almost looks like, moving cloud cover on a big planet.
Exactly. So I can come right over here to motion blur again and edit that. If it's too much of a distance, I can go halfway.
Uh-huh. But every time, in order to update it into the 3D object, you do have to save the texture file.
Right. Command S, to save it. There it is. All right.
Yeah.
So I like that, actually.
Yeah, that looks a bit better.
Okay, so and if you want to, we could add maybe a little Gaussian blur and see. It blocks out the motion too much, so I'll keep that off. All right, so Command S, make sure it's definitely saved. Once it's done, I'm happy with it. I'm gonna hit Command W just to close it out. Go over to my planet, hit my F key for full frame, so now I can focus on my planet, and we can go on to building the rings. All right.
Cool.
Now, let's have some fun with the rings. So I'm going to click on the planet, move it around. All right. Got some.
And so let me just ask you a question about how your layers are set up now, and also just kind of clarify what's happening for those people who maybe just be listening to the audio. So you have your layer 1 copy, which was what you used to generate the bump JPEG file.
Right.
So since you've already saved that JPEG out, do you still need that layer, or is that something you're going to keep around in case you want to do something else to it?
I don't need to layer it all. I've already saved it out. It's served its purposes. So I could delete it, which I think I will. That's a good suggestion. But
so then the other question is, so now you also have the background, which is currently turned off, and that is the original photograph of the marble. Is that going to play any role in the future, or are we done with that now?
That's what we're going to use next.
Ah, excellent. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to target that layer and duplicate it. And because the theory is that a lot of the rings from the planet could be debris from the planet itself. So I'm going to utilize the same content that we use for the planet to create my rings.
Ah, interesting.
So what I'm going to do is this. Now, I'm going to start by altering this into a smart object. Right click, create the smart object. Keep in mind that the more smart objects that we apply, the much more memory intensive your project's going to be.
Yeah.
So there are times we want to use smart objects. There may be times you may not. Depends on your particular system. But I'm going to assume everybody out there has a adequate system.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now we got a smart object. So we're going to go to our filter. I'm going to add some noise, a bunch of noise, to break it up, because to give it like that debris type of a look. I'm making sure monochromatic is targeted.
And do you, when you're adding noise for this purpose, do you usually leave it set to uniform distribution, or do you ever go with Gaussian?
I play around with it. I find the results to be fairly similar.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, let's try Gaussian, and you'll see what's going to happen. I don't want too much. There we go. I want to maintain some of the color.
Right.
Click OK. Now I'm going to add another filter blur and a motion blur, keeping it 0 degree angle, which is completely horizontal. But I'm going to pull this all the way to the right. And I'm going to target OK. Now I'm going to use a shortcut to reapply that last filter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Command or Control F as in Frank. Do it again. All right. And because it's a smart object, I'm going to do it again. And again. And again. And again. That's going to be the basis of my rings. Now, if you see, I have a whole bunch of motion blurs being applied. Now, this is where it can get memory intensive. So at this point, I think I'm going to want to rasterize this thing just to kind of keep this, more manageable.
Yeah.
So I'm going to right click, rasterize the layer. It's going to flatten it to it. Now I can come over here, Command M for curves, just to give it some contrast. There we go. It's going to be the basis of my rings. Give it a nice little contrast in there. I like it. All right. Now, let's go create the rings. Command T. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and Shift together.
And so just to clarify that, so the Command T is the shortcut to get into the free transform controls.
Correct. And once I'm in the free transform controls, I'm going to hold down the Option key, which means that if I hold down, drag one end of my rectangle, the other goes in the same direction or the opposite direction.
Right.
And I'm going to pull it just like so and hit enter.
So now you have what used to be a square layer filling the whole picture frame. Now is just sort of a more narrow horizontal band filling maybe 25%, I guess, of the area. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And this is going to be the basis of our ring.
Yeah. Can see it already.
So I'm going to go grab my rectangular marquee tool, because what I like to do next is cut out some gaps.
Oh, of course, because the rings have the gaps, yes.
Right, so rings have gaps. I'm going to select it. There we go. I'm going to make some really thin, some much thicker.
And so you're just building those selections or making those selections in the layer, then just pressing the delete key to cut those pixels out.
That's correct. So just select them, hit the delete key.
Clever.
Smaller one there. And another one right in here. There we go. I think that'll be good. I think I tell you what, I'm going to make this a little thicker. Opening. All right.
There we go. Yeah.
How's that look? Okay, so Command D to get rid of all my selections. So, one of the most rarely understood filters in Photoshop, which is actually one of my favorites, which is called the polar coordinates. So we're going to polar coordinate filter is simply going to take anything that's a rectangle and alter it into a circle or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So since I'm utilizing, now you notice that from the very beginning that my texture was a 5x5, excuse me, my texture was a 5x5 square.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll help with this process now. And
the fact you're saying the fact that it was square is significant in what you're about to do?
Well, yes and no, but for this particular instance, I'm going to answer your question with a yes, and that it'll help you to make sure everything's centered. Because polar coordinates like to work off the center of your composition.
I see, of course, yes.
So filter, distort, polar coordinate. All right, we want a rectangle to polar. And if I drop this back, you see what's happening.
Yes. Very slick.
All right, so we're going to target it.
So there was no, just to clarify for people listening, there was no special settings you made in the polar coordinates filter dialog. You just basically took what it gave you.
No, that's correct.
Because and just to tell people who are listening what's happening is it's taken that horizontal kind of ribbons of the ring texture that Stephen made, and now it has created this beautiful circular shape out of it.
Yep. So now we could do things like add some hue and saturation. If I want to use my shortcut Command or Control U, and come over here and play around with the hue and saturation, and I have that ability to do so.
Right.
Maybe want to add a little bit of warmth to it, and maybe pop up the saturation a little bit, like so. It's up to you. I'll go ahead and give it a little extra saturation, and I think at this point we're ready to actually. Let me turn off the background. We're ready to turn this into a 3D object.
All right.
All right. So with the 3D object, well, not the 3D object, with the 2D object selected, we go back to our 3D panel. Now, before we used mesh from preset, and we had targeted sphere to create our planet.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to go to 3D postcard and simply target create.
Postcard, huh?
And now we have our 3D object. So again, it says background mesh copy is what it's called it. Let's go ahead and just rename this one Rings.
And so what is the significance of the term postcard for that command, 3D postcard? Does it mean anything?
Well, you know what? That's what Adobe called it. It basically says take a flat sheet of paper and turn it into a flat plane 3D object.
I see.
So
because of course rings are flat, more or less.
Right. Rings are flat.
Yeah. Okay.
With the transparency associated with it.
Right.
All right, you can see the semblance of the square object all around your rings that represents transparent aspects of your layers.
Yes.
But it will remain transparent.
Cool.
All right, so now let's go back to our layers. Now look at what we have. We have two completely separate 3D scenes. Each 3D scene with its own set of cameras, 3D objects, and lights. Okay, so if I go to my layers, let's go ahead and turn my planet on up here. We can see the layer on top now. Go to my 3D panel. There's my planet or my lights. I can take the lights and I can adjust them. And you can see how the light is lighting the planet, but it will not light the ring because the ring is a completely different 3D scene. Does that make sense?
Yes. The ring is going to have its own separate 3D properties.
Right. So what we're going to do is we need to merge these two into a single 3D scene so that they work together off of the same properties and parameters of your
So my question then that pops to mind at this point in time would be right now the rings are really not in place to look like they are surrounding the planet. So is it my idea would be, it's a little bit too premature to merge these into a single 3D plane because I need to sort of do something to make the rings look like they are actually surrounding the planet. So do you still have access to them separately after you merge them into a single scene?
Oh, let's find out.
Okay.
So let's go. I'm going to select both layers. Command or Control key. To merge these two 3D layers, now we go to the 3D menu. Right on top of our menu, 3D menu, going to drop it down. And we're going to hit merge, the second one down, merge 3D layers. Target it.
All right. Yeah.
Sit back and relax. And there they are. Merge them together nicely for you.
So let me just describe what's happened for those people listening. When you did that, so before that, the rings were appearing behind the planet because, of course, that layer was lower down.
Right.
But then when you merge them together, magically, the rings are now appearing surrounding the planet.
Right.
And looking, convincing. So Does it take the empty, does it read the empty space in the middle of the ring circle and say, oh, there's nothing here, so the planet should go inside that?
That's exactly correct. So your 3D environment in Photoshop honors your transparent pixels.
I see. Okay, well, that's pretty cool.
And I've just saved it, by the way, for those who are watching, because I've had many tutorials where all of a sudden something crashes and I have to redo this all over again.
Awkward.
So, all right, now check this out. We've got them both merged together. You can see right here that we have a single 3D scene in a layer. However, we want to be in the 3D panel. And look at what we have. The rings are right there and the planet is right there.
So you have separate ways to control their visibility and some other properties there. So
if I go to the rings, and then up here on my navigational tools, now we've already played around with the rotation. I'm going to go to the very last one here, which is your resize or your scale.
Yeah.
I have the ring targeted. I'm just going to click anywhere outside the ring and click and hold and drag diagonally to enlarge my ring. So now it sits around my planet.
Right. And now it looks a lot more convincing, like a fine set of rings that any planet would be proud to have.
I agree.
The first set of rings was a little bit kind of wimpy looking, but now they're like, these are power rings.
Yeah, these are power rings. So
one ring to roll them all.
That's right. And they're all together at last. All right. So
cool.
now remember, here's the planet. Here's your rings, and we even have the textures. We can go and edit these textures anytime that we want. So now I want to move them as if they're one object. So I'm going to merge them together into a single 3D group. Because right now they're two separate groups. One for the ring, one for the planet.
Right.
So if I want to, and I have the rings positioned the way that I want them, therefore, hell, let's put them in a group, make life easier on myself. So Control or Command, select both the ring and the planet.
Right. Again, you're working in the 3D panel right now on this.
That's correct. And we're working inside the 3D panel. And I targeted both the ring and the planet layer, or objects, I should say. Right click, and then group objects. And there it is. It made it a new group.
So that's, I'm guessing, similar functionality to what you would expect when you group layers together in a layer group.
Absolutely correct. Okay. So all we're doing, there's still two separate 3D objects, but we group them together so it makes it easier for me to navigate them. So now I can go to my rotation tool and I can navigate them both as if it's one complete 3D object.
Excellent.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense, yes.
All right. So, of course, from here, we can do things like, of course, we're going to bring it into a little photographic scene, but if you wanted to, you could, let's see, make some stars for it. So it looks like this in space. So I'll do a little tutorial. I'm doing some really quick, fast stars. Let me just turn off the eyeball for the 3D object. And one of my favorite ways is fill it with some medium gray information. There we go. 50% gray to layer, a brand new layer. Go ahead to my filters and give it some noise, which is going to be the basis for my stars. There. And then I'm going to give the noise a little bit of a Gaussian blur. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Just slight. So to give the stars each of their characters. And then all I'm going to do is go to my image adjustments and go to my threshold. And it's going to alter that information from black to white until I get stars.
Right. So basically what threshold is doing, just to clarify for people, is it's reducing the tones on the layer to either black or white. And the threshold is how much you see of each, whether you see more black than white or less black, more white than black.
Right. So we click done. There you are. Turn your, okay. So if you wanted that little background that helps you to kind of,
Right.
your imagination there you have it. But we're going to use this to bring in to another photograph. So I'm going to hit the F key once because I'm in full frame mode, bring it on back. And there is my background there.
Can I ask you a question first before we do that? So to my eye, it doesn't quite look super convincing yet because the angle of the planet does not seem to match the angle of the rings.
All right, fine. We'll go angle the planet.
Do you see what I mean, though? It's the horizontal lines on the planet that sort of aren't matching the.
Just because to make the client happy.
Yeah. Well, or make me happy.
So it's pretty easy at this point. It's kind of like, okay, we got to angle the movement of the rings with the movement of the angle of the planet. So target the planet.
So we're back in the 3D panel, just for those listening. That's where we're at now.
Back to the 3D panel where we have both the separate ring and the planet. I'm going to target the planet. And then make sure my rotational command is targeted on my options bar. Also making sure your move tool is targeted. Otherwise, you will not be able to get any of these navigational tools.
Right.
So I can just rotate. There we go. Now I can.
There you go. Now that's looking better. Haha.
Yeah.
The armchair planetary scientist in me is happier now.
All right.
Yeah, excellent.
There we go. That looks pretty good. So,
yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. Thanks.
All right. So now, I'm not even too happy with this is a little bit too bright on some of the rings here. In fact, I'm going to go into the rings. I'm going to show you what we can do with the surface. Here are my rings. I just targeted the object, and again in the 3D panel. Target the materials. It's titled background copy by default, but if you click on it, right down here, it gives you options for your materials. So if I come to my diffuse layer for my ring and say, let's edit that texture, I have there's my layers. So I want to really intensify these rings a little bit. Image, apply image.
Oh, now you're getting sneaky.
Yeah, and I'm going to my apply image, and then I'm going to apply a blend mode to itself. And I can play around with these various options in here. And I might go to like overlay. And overlay, maybe it's just going to make it too bright. So let's try a linear light. That's definitely going to make it too bright. Maybe, let's see, color burn. That's not too bad. Maybe multiply. I like it, but not with so much opacity. So bring down the opacity just a little bit. We can do it that way. All right, and that just gives it a little bit more density to it. I'm gonna hit Command S to save it. I'm gonna hit Command W to close it out, and you can see the rings have been updated. They're a lot more richer looking.
Yeah. Well, they look a little bit. They just fit. They fit better.
Yeah,
the planet and everything. Yeah,
I agree. And the planet, I'm gonna make some adjustments as well. So go back to 3D, go to the planet, go to the surfaces. There we go. Okay, have it targeted. And you're noticing that whatever I target, the one that I can actually access will be nice and rich in full color, as you will see naturally. And everything else goes kind of a grayish whitish. That means it's not activated. So right on the planet texture there, see the opposite happening.
Yeah, I see that.
All right, but what I want to do with the planet, remember that bump map we saved out?
Yes.
Forgot about that, didn't you?
Yeah, we haven't used that. You're right.
Okay. So right down here, making sure the planet is targeted. There's a surface called sphere material by default. We can change it. But right down here, you see sliders, shine, reflection, then roughness, and so forth. But we're going to look at the bump. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to target the folder for the bump. And what am I going to do? I'm going to set my load texture. All right. So I don't need a new texture, just load texture. And there's the bump JPEG.
Right.
Double click it and sit back and relax. And let's see what happens. Okay. Now let's get in closer. And let's take the bump. Make sure everything good. I'm going to take the bump. Let's put the slider all the way to the right. Let's see what's happening. In fact, let me pull it a little bit more to the right, but I'm going to go adjust the light source itself. And in this particular case, which I did not realize before, is the light source. We don't have one. And I'm going to save this in case something crashes. I just hit Command S. Now, what's happening is it's being lit by what's called an environment map. If I turn off the eyeball, let's see if I can actually, if I click on the environment map, right down here in my properties, you can see it's being lit by an image, and this image is bright white. All right, so let's see if I uncheck that and see what happens. See what happened?
Yes. Now we got a black hole.
That's right. So what I want to do is I want to add a light source in there. That environment map was handy because now I can see everything. But then again, I see no real dynamic texturing on anything because everything's being evenly lit. So this ambient map or the IBL image-based light is lighting. It's like a big dome circling around your entire 3D scene that's lighting your 3D scene evenly from 360 degrees. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's no directional lighting going on.
Right.
All right. So it's like having a big white canopy over your portrait. And it's being lit in all directions. So if I turn that off, this is telling us that, there's no lights in here.
Yeah.
So I knew it's no lights because it's nothing here. There's no lights. If I go ahead and cascade up my group, there's no lights here. So right down here, it's a little light symbol on the bottom of your 3D panel. It's a little
light bulb there. Yep.
And we're going to go infinite light, which represents sunlight. There. Now there's your texture.
Oh, beautiful.
That was why we couldn't see the texture. So if I move my light source and I can really see the texture, which obviously I bumped up that slider way too much, but look at the rings too. The shadow of the planet is falling over the rings. The ring shadow over the planet. That's the way it should work.
Excellent. Yeah, I was going to ask you about having the shadows of the rings on the planet or the shadow of the planet on the ring. So there it is. That's
right. That's because we had inappropriate lighting situation in there. So now let's go back to our planet and let's make that adjustment. Go back to our group, the planet surface, and the bump is so strong. Let's bring it down so it's not so strong, just subtle, just like that, just a little subtlety to give it a sense that there's some texture there. And we just took the slider to a high percentage to a lower percentage, and you can use your taste. Just use what feels best for you. Yeah.
No, that's very cool. I love the shadows of the rings on the planet, and also the planet shadow on the rings, which is of course as it looks from the actual photographs that we see from the spacecraft and the telescopes that are sending those back to us.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so now let me go ahead and kind of zoom back a little bit so we can kind of see it. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on the object itself, and that we can see everything. We have a little bit. Now we can go even further with this because I can bring in a whole cloud sphere. So you have a cloud surface and all of that, but we won't have time for that today. But this will be good enough for a composite.
Yeah, no, that's great. So is the next step then taking this and exporting it in a way that we can easily add it to a photograph? Is that our?
Well, yeah. I mean, now some people, the way we used to do it before we had 3D in Photoshop was to create your 3D object in your 3D scene or your 3D program. Make sure everything is composed with the right cameras, associated, and then render it. And then you bring it in your 3D scene, which you render it out as a JPEG or a TIFF or all that stuff. But that's not the workflow I recommend anymore. I recommend is keeping the 3D properties because now it gives you flexibility in your 3D scene.
Oh, okay.
So, in other words, let's go hit the F key a couple of times so I can see. There we go. Here's my composite. This is not a composite. It's just a photograph I took out in Pigeon Point Lighthouse. And
looks like Pigeon Point.
Yep, near Santa Cruz. So
yeah, I know it well.
All right, so we're going to target my 3D object. I'm going to just save it again one more time, just to make sure there's no mistakes. Go to my layer, grab the 3D layer, and just drop it on top, and let it sit back and relax. And there she is. Okay, I don't need this one anymore, do I?
I guess not, unless you wanted to keep it as a sort of a planet template. I suppose you could do that.
No, I'm going to close it out because I don't need it anymore because it's just going to get in my way.
Right.
Now, you look, and there's my 3D scene. Now, I use my navigational tools. I've been using my rotational tools here for the entire time. All right. And now I'm going to use my slide tool, which is going to actually allow me to move things around a little bit. I need to put this now. You notice I have a ground plane there. I don't really need to see that at all. It's probably going to get in my way. And I believe under the view menu, it should be under show and ground plane. I'm going to take off the 3D secondary view menu, show, and then the 3D ground plane, take it off. Okay, there we go. Now we can kind of do what we want with it. Place now is just standard layer positioning. Place the 3D object underneath my Pigeon Point Lighthouse where I've already cut out the sky.
Oh, I see. Very good.
All right. So now I want to extend the sky a little bit. I want to change my composition. I'm hit the F key to go to full frame. There we go. Allows me some flexibility. Hit the C for crop because I'm going to change my composition and just pull it up to give me some more space up here and hit enter. Okay. Yeah.
So that's a nice property of the crop tool that viewers and listeners may not be aware of. Of course, you can crop a photo. That's how most people use it. But if you extend the crop box beyond the edges of the photo, it's another way to add canvas size.
That's exactly right. So I want to recreate this sky scene. Okay. So I'm going to make a brand new layer right beneath it. I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool. I'm going to target the top color of my horizon here, very top of the sky. And I'm going to go down and target the bottom color and make it the background color by holding the Option or Alt key on my keyboard while having the eyedropper. Grab that, and that will set your background color. Hit my G key for my gradient, and just simply shift, start from the top to the bottom, and there. All right. So let's go bring this up a little bit more so I can see it a little better. And actually I had the wrong thing targeted up here in my options. I have the right foreground and background color, but I'm going to go to my options bar, go to my gradient, and I want the foreground and background option and not the foreground to transparency.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to target this and do it again. So shift and drag it there. Okay.
There we go.
So now you've matched the sky that you've had already. And of course you can bring in, now this planet is obviously out in space. So it's going through the atmosphere. Let me go give this a little bit more a dynamic feel. So I'm going to target the planet here, hit the V key for the move tool, bring it up maybe like so, kind of like this. Let's go to my rotation on the Z axis. So not the first option, but the second icon here. click it and I can rotate it like this.
Ah, cool.
Now it's showing that shadow on the ground plane, which I don't want it to do that. So to turn that off for those of you who need to accomplish that is go to your 3D panel. And let's see, go to the environment, and right down here on the shadow, it says opacity 60%, take it down to 0. It'll never show up again.
But does that affect the shadow of the planet on the rings and the rings on the planet?
Nope, it only affects the shadow on the ground plane.
Excellent, excellent. Cool.
So now I'm going to just bring the planet down a little bit. I might, you know what? In fact, I'm going to rotate it up just slightly. And I'm going to enlarge it. Make it a little larger. All right, so I'm going to come here.
Man, there'd be some serious gravitational side effects of being that close to a big planet like that.
How many times do we see like sci-fi scenes like this where they're not really correct, but people do it anyway?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so let's match the lighting in our scene. Lighting's coming from the left.
Yep.
Go to our light source. All right, remember our light source here. And keep it similar. And if we want to increase the intensity of lighting under your properties or the color of the light source. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if I want to make it more warmer.
Oh yeah.
All right. You can do that. You have that option.
Right.
All right, so now we have to do some compositing magic here. For one, I think I'm going to bring down the opacity of the planet so it drops back into the theme.
Right, because that, if you, when you see the moon during a daylight hour, and of course this is, obviously a daylight scene at the lighthouse, the moon is very sort of muted in terms of its brightness and contrast.
Exactly right. So that starts to make it appear, because you got a lot of haze going on back there. So,
well, and that also makes it match the brightness values of the shadows around the far rocks and the lighthouse. Because before, when we had the really dark shadows of the planet behind it, there was this visual disconnect between the way the shadows look between those two elements.
That's right. And then the shadow side of the planet is actually going to fall into the same color as the horizon.
Uh-huh.
All right. Which it doesn't now.
Right.
So we have to bring in a mask.
A layer mask.
There you go. A layer mask. And I think I'm going to hit the B key. I'm going to right click and I'm going to grab a nice soft edge brush here. Okay. And I'm going to resize my brush. Now, what I'm doing is I'm on a PC, so it's Alt right click, drag left to right with your mouse. Gives you a subpixel resizing. Okay. And on the Macintosh, it's a Option and Control hold down with the left click and hold and drag left to right. Down for hard, up for soft. And I'm going to just double check my Wacom pen properties. I want to make sure that I have the transfer turned on here. Transfer may or may not work. It's a driver issue. For you guys, it'll work. Once you have pen pressure selected for both opacity and flow, it'll work for you. But for some reason, I've got a driver bug.
Oh, no, not a driver bug.
Yeah, it just it doesn't give me. So I may have to bring down my opacity a little bit. Okay, so now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away. So I'm going to paint with black on the mask, and I'm going to take it away. See?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so just have it sort of fade out there.
You got to fade it out, because anything that's going to be in the shadow section, it's going to take on the color of the sky.
Right.
There.
Oh, very cool.
Of course, we can come over to the opacity and make adjustments there. You've got Also options under your 3D panel. You can play with your light source. Don't forget that. See?
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is excellent. This is great. So seeing it integrated here into an actual photograph really kind of brings it home to me, coming from a photography background, as well as somebody who makes photographic composites. It just looks a lot more familiar, and it gives me a lot more ideas than just sort of seeing it as a 3D object just on a 3D grid.
Right. And I'm going to make one other little modification. I'm going to actually, let me move this up a little bit. Let me target this, hit my V key, which is going to allow me to move. I'm going to, and just go over to the pan tool. Let me see if I move that up. Now, what I've done was I accidentally targeted the rings, but that's okay. I can come back and grab my group, pull this up right about there. Now, it's too linear. It's too linear on my my masking here. So I'm going to my brush, because remember your haze is coming from the bottom as well.
Right, because whenever something is near the horizon, it's going to be
right
more affected by the haze. Yeah.
Right. There we go. Just a little bit there. Okay. All right, nice. And then you can work it out. And then of course you can replace the background with other photographic compositing elements.
Sure. Yeah.
But it gives you an idea of a practical application of 3D in Photoshop for photographic compositing purposes.
Great. So that actually is a perfect segue to, I think, stop the screen share right there. Well, that was so cool and useful, Stephen. Thanks for preparing that demo and showing us so much. No, I really appreciated that. And as I mentioned earlier, it really, I think, to see a 3D object like that created from scratch and then integrated into an actual photograph. I mean, for me, coming from the photographic standpoint of creating images, that really does make it seem a lot more relevant in terms of, oh yeah, cool, yes. And gives me ideas for maybe how to apply some of those tricks to my own images. So thank you.
You're very welcome. There's this huge audience out there who's fascinated with the concept of photography as a compositing tool.
Yeah.
But I think, I figured this may be kind of a fun one for everybody to enjoy.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it definitely, it's kind of like reignited that little fire that I experienced the last time we talked, where I wanted to go ahead and try some of this stuff myself. So, I got to find time to try it again. So we will put the finished version of that picture you just created in the demo on the webpage for this episode. That way people can see that version there. Right, so the book again is called Photoshop 3D for the Creative Professional.
Yeah, 3D Photoshop for the Creative Professional. And it's 3D. On the shelves. So in your little bookstores, and I would highly recommend Amazon. Go directly to Amazon, get it, better price, and they ship practically the next day.
Yeah.
Real fast about it, but that I would go for that.
Okay, well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yes. And then the app, is that something? There's information in the book of where they can get the app, right?
When you purchase the book, it'll have all information about how to go get the app.
Cool, excellent. Yeah. Well, listen, speaking of books, a few weeks back on episode 52 of TheFIX, we had a book giveaway that was sponsored by Rocky Nook, and one of our listeners and viewers, Wayne, don't have his last name yet, but Wayne won that book. So we'll be in touch with Wayne, and we'll have another book giveaway coming up soon. So stay tuned for that out there in internet land if you want to get a book from Rocky Nook Press, and we do appreciate Rocky Nook sponsoring that for us.
Great.
So Stephen, your website where people can find you?
Yeah, chromeillusion.com, www.chromeallusion.com.
So it's not illusion with an I, it's allusion.
Illusion. Yes.
Illusion. Okay, well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Thanks again so much for taking the time to show us that great demo. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Sean.
Yeah, you're welcome. Always a pleasure. And thank you out there in internet land for tuning in, joining us on The Fix. Remember, you can always download an audio version of this podcast on iTunes, or you can come and watch the video version and find an audio version on the website, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFix. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Look forward to joining with you then. I'm Sean Duggan. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.